What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Kaleah LaRoche, is back with us today to talk about self-love, putting yourself first as the antidote to codependency. Kaleah is an author, visionary, musician, and healer who has been working in the healing arts since 1988, when she opened her first practice as a holistic spiritual counselor and clinical hypnotherapist. After going through a series of toxic relationships, experiencing narcissistic abuse and PTSD, Kaleah's work transitioned to helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. Welcome back to AVAIYA.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so good to be back.
Yeah, great to have you again. And I am really excited about today's conversation. Obviously, self-love is a big one when it comes to people struggling with codependency and shame. So how would you describe self-love?
I would describe self-love as an action step. So as a series of actions that we take rather than a warm, fuzzy feeling, like a lot of people think that self-love is like, oh, I feel so loving towards myself. And, I think it's really important that we understand that it's really about taking loving care of ourselves and taking loving action towards ourselves, doing loving things to ourselves, talking to ourselves in loving ways, and learning some habits that are loving towards ourselves.
Got it. Yeah, I like that. That's a good way of putting it. Because yes, I think some people, if the practice of self-love is not something that they've maybe are that familiar with, or they practice much, then yes, we think of it as like this gushy feeling thing, as opposed to, right, like simple daily actions of like loving and respecting ourselves and making sure we're giving ourselves what we need. Right. I love that. I love that. Self-love. There you go. So like, what are some examples, like what people could do to be practicing that self-love?
I think to begin with, to develop awareness that of the things that you're telling yourself on a daily basis. So to become aware, to become mindful, and listen to your self-talk, because a lot of people have really negative self-talk, but they're not that aware of it. It's just automatic. It's conditioning. So if you can start to develop awareness and start to catch yourself when you're being unloving to yourself, when you're being unkind, when you're being critical, when you're being judgmental, and learn how to stop that, to say, cancel, stop, and interject with something positive. I've just been judging to myself. I need to be kind. That's not fair. You're a good person, just kind of start to interject positive things. And what ends up happening is when you learn to catch yourself being negative, when you learn to catch all that, abusive self-talk and start replacing it with positive self-talk, it becomes a habit. Mm-hmm. So when we do something long enough, 30 days, technically it becomes a habit. So we have to develop the habit of treating ourselves well through mindfulness. And I think that's probably the most important thing that we can do. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. My question was just like, what are some examples of how people can practice the self-love? And right, you're talking awareness. So we have to become aware of how we're talking to ourselves, how we're judging ourselves, and then mindfully say nice things to ourselves. So I think that's great. And I love that you said it has to become a habit, because I think so many of our defaults are be mean to ourselves, right? And not talk nice to ourselves. And so, yeah, we've got to develop the muscle in order to have it become like a daily routine, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about shame, since that's part of our conversation today. So how do you think shame prevents someone who's codependent from loving themselves?
Well, shame to me is a core wound. It's also, I think, passed on from generation to generation, and everybody has it to some degree. But it's the core wound that says, I'm not good enough. I'm inadequate. I'm flawed to the core. There's something seriously wrong with me. And ironically, almost everybody has that to some degree, but we're not aware that other people have it. We think we are the only one that is struggling with it. So we have to become aware that we have this belief that there's something flawed about me. There's something wrong with me. And when we become aware, so once again, I'm bringing in that awareness, that when we become aware of that thought, there's something wrong with me, that gets encoded into a belief, I'm flawed, I'm inadequate, people don't like me. So, that ties into codependency, because we end up making these choices out of our belief that we are flawed. Nobody else would put up with me, so I can tolerate this abuse because I'm lucky to have somebody in my life, because who would want to put up with me, who would want to tolerate me? And just that kind of being down on ourselves because of the way that we feel about ourselves, we also allow other people to be abusive to us and mistreat us. And then we also might be afraid of speaking out and telling our truth and, being authentic, right, because we're just trying to cover up for all of our inadequacy. We put masks on to cover up for our inadequacy, our feelings of inadequacy. So when we start to address that core shame, that, you've probably, since you're doing a whole program on shame, that guilt comes in. The idea that guilt is that I did something wrong, and the shame is I am something wrong. And you'll probably hear that a lot through this, as you do the interviews. But this idea that I am something wrong causes people to navigate through life in a very different way. So it just ties into the codependency, and that your behaviors, your codependent behaviors, just become a lot stronger as you're trying to compensate for this feeling of inadequacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like layers and layers of coping and traits and all of that we can pile up on ourselves over the years to absolutely cover up that how we feel about ourselves. And I love that you mentioned that. Right. We think no one else is having, these shame beliefs or thoughts about themselves, when the reality is, yes, everyone does to some extent. It's like the human condition, right? To believe we're not good enough. It's just how many people, are really believing it most of the time versus, oh, it's here and there. So yeah, I love that you said that, because then it just makes us feel that we're not alone. And then, we can all be working on it. It's not just this unique, special thing that just we have, it's a very collective kind of trait. So got it.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's really helpful to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Realize that how I feel on the inside, and this is what a lot of people do. They compare how I feel on the inside to how you look on the outside. Mm-hmm. So if I appear to be strong and confident on the outside, that's the mask in a sense, or I may have a strong, confident part of me that I lead with, but underneath that mask is these feelings of inadequacy, or, maybe feelings that I'm doing something wrong, or I said something wrong, or, there's just all this shame that kind of comes in that everybody has. So when we stop comparing how we feel on the inside with how other people present on the outside, then we're going to get closer to seeing a real accurate picture of how people really are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. It's funny because when I totally do that, right? Comparing like, oh, if I'm feeling insecure and, oh, that person outside of me is so confident, look at them. Right. And I mean, we all do that. And then sometimes, right, if we get real with people, they'll tell you, oh no, I'm actually really nervous right now too. And, or insecure or whatever. But a lot of times we don't see it if it's not like super obvious. And yet we're all, struggling with it to some extent. So let's talk about putting ourselves first, right? So what does it mean to put ourselves first? And how is this the antidote to codependency?
I love that question because, I work with a lot of people coming out of narcissistic relationships, narcissistic family systems, and we all have come to know narcissism is like all about me, it's very self-centered. And ironically, codependency is quite opposite, is that where narcissists are, me, and self-focused, the codependent is you. The codependent focuses on, let's just look at relationships, for example. In primary relationship, the codependent becomes kind of hyper-focused on what's going on with the other person. Do they like me? How are they reacting to me? How are they responding? What do they need? How can I make them like me? How can I please them? How can I stop them from being upset or uptight? Or how can I fix them if they have a problem? So we're very much, as codependents, focused. I say we because I'm a recovering codependent. I own it. And I been there, done that, and still doing it. And, when we start to bring our attention back to ourselves and self-love, taking care of ourselves, instead of saying, what's going on with you, we bring it back to what's going on with me. Instead of going, well, I need to fix you because you're drinking too much and I need to get you into a 12-step program so you will stop drinking too much. It's more like, well, I need to get me into a 12-step program to deal with my behaviors that are causing me to enable you. And, instead of trying to make you like me so you're not abusive to me, because codependents will often look at abuse coming from the other person as a sign of our own unworthiness, that there's something wrong with us. So we go back to the shame again. And what's really important is that we keep coming back. We keep coming back to a self-focus and know that it's not going to make us narcissistic. It's not going to, what it's going to do is balance the scale. So we have to understand that as codependents, we've gone way over here on this end of the spectrum, as where the narcissist is way over here on this end of the spectrum. So we have to come back into balance. And we come back into balance by focusing on ourselves, by being attentive to our own needs, by asking ourselves, what do I want? What do I need? How can I take care of myself?
Mm-hmm. Yes, balancing the scales. That's absolutely. It's
yes.
not black or white. We're not going to, if we just start thinking about how we can love ourselves and do more for ourselves instead of everybody else, it's not like, oh, all automatically we're narcissistic, right? It's that the balance between the two. What are some of the most common behaviors you see in your practices when it comes to codependency, the most common traits?
One of the top ones is people pleasing.